Welcome back to our challenge series with these videos. Today we're talking about clips. So this will end up being a multi-part video. This will be part one where we'll just be talking. And then we'll cover actually how to draw clips and fit clips in a later video or videos. I'm not sure if it'll be a two-part or three-part series yet. So today we want to talk about a little bit of the history of clips and how they function and when we should use what type. And then we'll get into some theories on drawing and fitting them later. So first of all, and we're all familiar with clips, we have three primary types. We have toe clips at the toe of the shoe. We have side clips, generally between the second and third nail holes, and quarter clips, which are between the first and second nail holes. So, as we think about clips, for me it's helpful if we go back to some of the history of utilizing clips and when we use them, why we've used them. So, generally speaking, in the past, and we're talking past as in 1920s or before, at this particular moment. So here in the States, we transitioned or began the transition from primarily horse transportation to primarily vehicular or automobile transportation starting around 1900. So 1908, the Ford Model T came out, which is the first vehicle that really came out in sufficient numbers to change the way things were done for the majority of the population. So we went from something like 27 million horses to 3 million horses here in the United States from around the 1908 mark to the 1930s. So within that time frame, within that 20-ish years or so, the horse was really replaced for normal transportation. So anything that we're talking about as far as traditional shoeing goes, if we're talking shoeing horses for work, for transportation, for farm work, things like that, we almost always had toe clips on horses. And you will see that all the way around. Front and hinds were toe clipped, and then it was our riding horses have what you would consider hunt horses or fox hunter types that would be shod also with quarter clips behind. So, and we see that in a lot of our literature as well. If we look back into the textbooks from the late 1800s and even clear through the 1800s, and even into the early, or rather late 1700s, generally speaking, you're going to see a toe clip. You will see quarter clips behind on some shoes, but that's typically for a light riding horse. Yeah, primarily hunter types if you're talking about European horses, and much of our literature, of course, does come from Europe and Britain. So why is that, and why is it now most of the shoes that we see here in the States that are manufactured are side clipped front and quarter clipped hind? So for me, it helps us if we think about the why behind that. So what do clips do? Clips don't hold shoes on. So one of the many misconceptions around clips, something that we will quote often, is that a clip is worth 2 nails. Well, no, I can't take a toe clipped shoe, set it on a foot, and it stay the same as 2 nails. I can put 2 nails in a shoe, trot the horse down the aisleway, bring him back, the shoe will still be there. If I have one clip on a shoe, it's not going to do that. So, what do they actually do? They don't hold the shoe to the foot. What they do is they don't remove, but take on the shearing force perpendicular to the clip. So, for our toe clips. If as the horse travels forward in a straight line, or if they are standing and stomping flies, most of the force applied to that shoe is coming from the front of the foot, either as that foot lands and slides, or as the foot is driven into the ground as they stomp. Either way, force is coming from the front of the shoe. So with that toe clip being perpendicular to that force, it is being driven back onto the foot and not allowing the shoe to slide back. Whereas with the thin shoeing nails that we use, they aren't, while they can take some of that force, that's not their primary purpose. Their purpose is to hold the shoe to the foot. Now, if we use sufficient number of nails, then yes, they take on enough shearing force that they typically don't break. But we've all had lost shoes that we come back to where the heads of the nails are still in the shoe, the shank of the nail is still in the foot, the horse has simply stomped or driven that shoe back, let it off, shearing the nails. So toe clips were originally used because most horses were traveling basically in a straight line. Think about your road horses, think about your trail horses, right? So even though they're turning some, most of the force is still straight. So that would be why they used so many toe clips in the past. Now, thinking about that time frame though, while there have been manufactured shoes since the late 1800s, they were of an extremely poor quality. So you still had to forge them for the most part, cutting heels off, drawing clips, redoing nail holes, things like that. Many blacksmiths and farriers at the time still found it more economical and easier to apply handmade shoes than they did keg shoes or machine-made shoes. So they also weren't clipped, and so you still had to draw a clip. Generally speaking, everything got toe clipped. Now, quarter clips are useful on the hind most typically, which we should note, the toe clip can be fit to any shape of foot. So, and we'll talk about shapes of feet in a different video, but I will say that there are 4 main shapes, with the 5th shape being a combination of the two, or of any two. A toe clip can be fit to any shape of foot. Doesn't matter the shape, it can be fit. There are a few times we should not use a toe clip. We'll just need to think about that. Quarter clips. These lend themselves most easily to a traditional hind shape, that pointed spade-like shape, either between the first and second nail holes. So that straight quarter in that hind shape, or that straight toe quarter, then lends itself to a pair of clips placed there. Now, that gives us a few different advantages on that hind foot. For one, if we're talking about clips being most effective in taking on force that is perpendicular to the face of the clip, that means that this foot, as it lands, can land a little bit off to the side, right? So hind feet are not straight to the horse. They're not straight to how they land. They land lateral heel first, typically. It depends on the conformation of the horse, right? But a lot of force is going to come onto that medial toe, or onto that medial quarter clip in a lot of cases. Now, because of both the biomechanics of the horse and because of the current way that we use horses, these quarter clips will of course take on some force from straight on. A lot of it will be a bit from the side, But it can also take on a rotational force, a torsion force, a twisting, because of how they're fit. That is useful partly because with our modern sport horses, since we're not using them primarily for transportation, now we're making a lot more turns, a lot more circles, a lot more turning on the hindquarters. So we have more rotational force on that hind foot. So quarter clips can be quite useful for that. Now, our side clips, these we don't see in textbooks, or at least not the old textbooks, very often, but we do see them on the vast majority of machine-made shoes today. So why is that? So first of all, we have to, again, think back to our history and why are manufacturers making side-clipped shoes instead of toe-clipped shoes here in the States? So as we mentioned, with automobiles taking over, the horse numbers dropping off from 27 million to 3 million in the span of 20 years. So the span of the career of one farrier, right? We went from blacksmith shops or farrier shops being all over, and everyone came to us. You brought your horse to the farrier, not the farrier traveling to you. We had multiple people working together rather than individuals. And so we went from a high employment number to, if you drop 24 million horses, we're going to have to drop quite a few farriers as well. So now we've got a huge decrease in the industry. There is not the money in it that there was before. Remember, we were using them as transportation. A lame horse costs money at that point, whereas now cars have replaced the horse. The horse is just there. Most of them are pasture ornaments. There's a few still being used for field work, but not that many, and certainly not that many used for transportation. Now they're not worth anything, and so no one wants to pay anything. This is also when schedules kind of got out of whack. If we look into kind of the 1900 era or before, we're looking at schedules that were every 3 to 4 weeks for a horse. By the time we get to the 1930s, it's very common to have a 6, 8, 10, or 12-week schedule, just because no one wants to spend the money. Well, if no one wants to spend the money, and as farriers we're not getting paid as much, we're not going to put the time into education either. We see a law at that time in textbooks being written. We see a law in the science being progressed as far as shoeing horses. What we do see is manufacturing taking over. So keg shoes begin getting better. They even start to become pre-clipped. But since we have a lack of education at that point in history, we have a lot of the keg shoes, if they did come clipped, they were selling more quarter clips than they were toe clips. Because, as we know, if we fit these on a regular basis, it takes skill to fit either one correctly, but you can't cheat a shoe with a toe clip. You have to fit the toe, which is kind of the hardest part to fit anyway, right? Whereas whichever way our career has gone, some of us went from being kind of a self-taught farrier in the beginning and then getting education, or we've had a good education from the beginning. Either way, we all know that fitting a toe clip is going to be harder than cheating the fit on a side clip shoe or quarter clip shoe, right? Side clip shoe, whack it open or closed a little bit, pull it back till the clips hit, nail it on, right? Which nails are going to work? Well, we end up seeing some guys don't drive toenails simply because they don't fit, right? They haven't fit the foot. Now, that's not bashing side clips. Side clips have their place. But what we found during the 30s, 40s, 50s, a lot more quarter clip shoes were being sold. Now, this is still easier to fit than this if you're doing a poor job or not trying that hard. And so since these were being sold and guys were reshaping them into fronts instead of, whereas it was front versus hind, the manufacturers decided, why not just sell a front shoe with side clips? Well, now we have this. And it's stuck because we still buy them. So we also have a change in what horses do. Plus, we have a change in how trainers think and how veterinarians think. So there have to be several more of us than just me, and I know there are, that have had trainers panic when they see a toe clip on a horse, assuming that we cannot have correct biomechanics simply because of that toe clip. Whereas if you fit the same shoe in the same way with a side clip, everything is okay. They assume that this is better than this. Now, that is not true, not in most cases, but it's something that we have seen in the veterinary world for some veterinarians and in the world of trainers and owners. So it comes down to us being able to educate on why we use what. So can I go back through these? Our clips are going to be most effective perpendicular to the clip. Force coming in to the foot is just from the front. We want a toe clip. Hinds, most likely going to be quarter clips. It does help with some of the rotational or torsional force, as well as forces coming from the front or a little bit from the side. Our side clip shoes, it depends on the shape of the foot as to whether or not these work well, or if we would want to go to one of the other two options. But because of where they are on the foot, they do not work that well to stop force coming straight back. If you've had horses that stomp, especially on hard ground or concrete, they can still shear nails. Right? If they're stomping flies on the concrete, they will still shear nails and drive the shoe back even though it's side clipped. That's where our toe clip becomes very handy. For our side clipped shoes, they will deal, if properly fit, they will deal with some of our torsional or twisting force, but they're more likely to deal with force coming from the sides. Now, when would that be useful? Why would that be useful? Most of our horses, trail horses, any type of horse that's working on the road, their force is coming from front. Most of the time out in the pasture, it's coming from the front. Stomping flies, it's coming from the front. So why do we want this? Well, a lot of our sport horses, again, are working on small circles. They're doing a lot more spins, a lot more turning. This can be useful. It can also be useful for certain situations where we simply cannot fit a toe clip. So we would not want to fit a toe clip, or we can't fit it correctly to a horse that has foundered and has damage to the dorsal wall, right? So there are several instances. If we have damage to that wall, to the spot where our toe clip is going to go, we can't really use it. We might use side clips instead. That might be our better option. Or quarter clips may be the better option. We have to think through what is going to work the best. Now, it also depends on what modifications we want to use in addition to our clips. So, we've talked in the past about rolled toes or rocker toes. You can use a rolled toe or rocker toe with a toe clip. For many people, however, it's going to be easier to use those modifications with either a quarter clipped or side clipped shoe. So, thinking about why we want to use what clip will be very important. So, go back through and think about each horse and why you would want to use them. Now, for myself, most feet, especially front feet, are going to be toe clipped, especially if they're within proportion, within balance, and they're where I want them. I will occasionally use a side clipped shoe if the horse calls for it. Many hinds are clipped with quarter clips, simply because of the job the horse is doing. Now, trail horses, I'm probably going to toe clip them all the way around, unless I happen to be using a keg shoe that already has quarter clips. So, for instance, this Sport Horse by HMS, as far as keg shoes go, pretty decent. Clips are a little big for my liking. We'll talk about the size and shape of clips in a later video. There are benefits and detractions, a lot of detractions in my opinion, to a pre-clipped shoe. There are some benefits to it as well, however. So we will take a look at actually clipping shoes in the next video, and then either the same video or a third one, we will look at actually fitting clips to feet. All right.